Hello, Vanessa.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And how are you?
I'm doing great as well, thanks.
Yeah, and welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2026, Vanessa. And before going to start your session, I want to introduce you to our audience. Okay.
Okay.
Vanessa Hariprasad is a transformational leadership coach, mentor, and a global change maker with an extensive track record in human capital development, strategic leadership, and people centered performance. She holds an MBA and is certified as a senior professional certified coach, senior PCC. Vanessa is a two-time global award-winning mentor and the founder and the CEO of Shankara People Solutions, an organization focused on helping high performers and leaders build resilience, clarity, purpose, and sustainable success. In addition to her coaching practice, Vanessa serves in editorial leadership as a chief editor of IGC magazine, where she campaigns impactful storytelling, celebrates innovation, and amplifies influential voices shaping positive change around the world. That was then wonderful work you have done, Dr. Vanessa Harprasad, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So basically, thank you for that introduction. Um, I started Shankara People Solutions 2 years ago. I work with leaders across Africa and the UAE, and in my experience, what I'm going to be talking to you today is something I believe is more important than any other leadership trait. It's how you lead yourself before you lead anyone. So you can put it on slide mode, the slides. Go back to the first slide. There you go. And put it on presentation mode. Hello, Marua. Good to see you here. Hello, Lily. Hello. Let's see who else we have here today. Busola. Nice to see you all. I'm just waiting for my slides to show up. Hello. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Great. So today I want to have a different conversation with you. We talk about innovation and innovating young leaders. But what does that require? Today I'm going to share with you what it actually takes to lead in a world where we are living right now. We talk about the VUCA world where it's full of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So how do we lead through that? It sounds so scary. How have you been leading through it? I want you to write in the chat. Um, how are you feeling about leadership right now? What one word comes to mind when you think about leadership? Just type it in the chat. One word that comes to mind when you think about leadership. Competence, credibility, and courage. Okay, those are big asks, but very necessary. Thank you, Marua. Anyone else? Okay, you can move to the next slide. Emotional intelligence. Okay. All right, yes. It does require emotional intelligence. So the leaders who will define the next decade are not the ones who had the right answers. They are the ones who stay standing long enough to find them. This is what is called resilient leadership. And the world has decided that it is no longer optional. So I want you to, using an emoji, give me a thumbs up if you think you are a resilient leader. Okay. Okay, great. So a lot of you think you're resilient leaders. Excellent. Well, you know what? I also used to think I was a resilient leader because I had this view that most people have about resilience. But today I want to offer you a different view. Resilient leadership is not a personality style. It is actually the new standard of excellence. And I know this not only because of research, but because of the 24 years of experiencing it in the corporate world and also through my lived experience. Next slide. So, resilience for me didn't show up in a classroom. In fact, it showed up in real life long before I had the words to describe it. For 10 years, I led the way many of us are taught to lead: hard, fast, pushing through, always available, always on. I wore my exhaustion like it was a badge. If you've done this too, give me a thumbs up if you've also done this. I used to ignore every signal that my body sent out to me. I thought that was resilience. Resilience was about overcoming everything, not showing weakness, not showing that you can't handle everything. Resilience meant for me at the time that you had to be bulletproof. So there was no time to reflect, no time to think through it. You just had to push through and get things done. And eventually, I found out that this was actually wrecking my body and wrecking my mental peace. Then one day, my body refused to listen to me. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition in 2015 called lupus. The full name is systemic lupus erythematosus. It's an autoimmune condition where the body attacks itself because it doesn't recognize itself anymore. In my body, I started to have severe nerve damage. I lost all feelings in my hands and my feet. I couldn't drive anymore. I started to have these brain shocks, like gunshots going off in my head. I started to have mouth ulcers, couldn't eat, lost my teeth, started to get very weak. And for 9 months, I kept going to the doctor to get antibiotics. They couldn't find out what was wrong with me. It took 9 months for my diagnosis to reach me. And in that time, I suffered in silence in corporate because I was in a new, exciting job. And I didn't want anyone to know that I was ill because I didn't want them to use it against me. I didn't want promotional opportunities to be taken away because somebody would say, Vanessa is too ill to handle this workload. And so I pushed myself, hid it. Until in 2016, I decided I couldn't do that anymore. I had to share with the company what I was going through, and I shared it with my manager. I then started a wellness campaign, starting to learn more about how the employees in the organization can learn to be more aware of themselves, take better care of their health. I then started a regional wellness program and then a global wellness program. My campaign was called It Starts With Me. And in 2024, before I left, 2 years before I left, the campaign won a global award competing with 70 countries. So, what does it mean? It starts with me. It starts with me meant for me that my health is my choice. How I lead while navigating the illness is my choice. I wasn't going to be dictated by the disease. I was going to get all the promotions. I was going to explore the world. And through living with my disease, I traveled the world, live in Malaysia for 6 months, but it came at a price. When I left in 2024 to start my own company, a leadership firm, I started to travel the world to talk about resilience, sharing real life experience. It was very difficult. I had chronic pain every single day. But I developed a framework, which I'm going to share later in the presentation, called SCCR: self awareness, compassion, curiosity, and resourcefulness. These were all leadership capacities that I had to practice daily in order to navigate the illness and still be a high performer. Even though I had a condition, I wasn't willing to sacrifice my work performance. And to a large extent, it became a battle with the disease. And so these capacities of becoming more self aware, showing compassion, helped me actually tap into my inner strengths and lead with more authenticity. Okay. So there was a time when last year I was giving a talk in London at the House of Lords. I was in so much pain that I go through every month. And I normally get 30 intense painkillers that you get after coming out of surgery. But I had run out and the pain was unbearable. Over the counter painkillers was not working. So I went and got heat patches. I placed them on my lower abdomen to relieve the pain. But the next day I was traveling to Dubai to give a speech and also collect an award. And an unexpected nightmare happened. I had left the patches longer than they were allowed to. And when I got to Dubai, I found that all my skin had melted off. I was completely terrified. My son was traveling with me at the time, and so he went to get some medical supplies. At that time, I was so terrified and so mad at myself. Like, how could I have not have read this? How could I have let this happen? How am I going to go and speak tomorrow? And then I had to remind myself of my framework. Take a deep breath, pause. Let's deal with what's happening at the moment. The next day, the nightmare continued. I could not get out of bed. My body went into shock. I had to tell the organizer that I won't be able to come to the conference just yet, even though it was just downstairs. I needed a few more hours. It took me 5 hours for my body to recuperate and get enough energy for me to walk to the conference. I put on band-aids and I went on stage. After all, I was talking about resilience. How could I not show up? And so I went, delivered my speech, and you wouldn't believe, as I was getting ready, I couldn't even find part of my suit. In that moment, I also thought, okay, how can I be resourceful here? Took an old jacket, mixed it up with a dress, and off I went. Okay. When I came back from Dubai, my health started to deteriorate. I could not walk for too long. I showed up at webinars, I showed up at family gatherings, and when I came back home, I would just go into bed. It got to a stage in January where I could hardly get out of bed and I could hardly walk. I got an infection, started to have massive digestive issues, couldn't get out of bed, and eventually when I collapsed, I was taken to hospital. And that's when I received the news I was not ready to hear. I was told that my kidneys had failed. Can you imagine? I was so angry. How could I have, um, how could I have a kidney failure when I've been surviving lupus for so long? It was my framework that helped me get through that week. I was tied to so many different machines. My blood pressure monitor monitoring me 24/7. Every 15 minutes, it'll check my pressure because I was on strong antibiotics and my pressure could drop at any time. I had chronic low blood pressure. I had a catheter. I was in bed. I could not feed myself, could not bathe myself. They were taking blood every day to the point where I had to have a blood transfusion. Cut me on my shoulder, find a vein close to my heart. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. I told myself, I have such strong faith. Why am I so afraid? And I made a decision to trust in my spirituality, to surrender to God. That night, I had a vision, surrendering myself to the Lord's feet. I said, Lord, I know that you will heal me. And I saw a vision open up where the doctor walked in and the doctor said, I've never seen results like this before. It's a miracle. Your kidneys have healed. The next day, the exact scene played out. I walked out of hospital. I walked in hospital with a kidney that needed to be on dialysis. I walked out of hospital with a kidney that was completely healed. The joy I felt was unexplainable. I was also told they couldn't find any markers of lupus. The excruciating pain I've been living with for 10 years was gone. You can call this a miracle because I did. But it was also a moment of me tapping into a resource. I had forgotten that spirituality was my resource. And the framework I'm going to share with you today is actually a framework that reminds you of what you can tap into when you are faced with uncertainty. So I have a question here. What does resilient leadership mean in today's rapidly changing world? That is a great question, Casey, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. What I found most of the time as leadership is that we are mostly performing. Resilient leadership is actually a system. It is a system that you build for yourself. It's personal to you, but it's imperative for you and the business. It's not separate from the business. So, what do I mean by personal? I mean that to have sustainable leadership, you have to understand yourself. You have to know who you are. You have to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your triggers. You need to be curious. You need to be compassionate when things don't work out and be curious about what is this moment teaching me? High performers have a very obvious flaw. They are the harshest critics. That self-criticism eats at them. Okay? It eats at them. So compassion is something myself that I did not practice. I was compassionate to others. It was easy to do. But I always felt like I held myself to a higher standard. So compassion meant sacrificing. It was weakness for me. I had to learn to be compassionate, to tell myself, it's okay. So I had to silence that critical voice in my head. Okay. So, how does resilience help leaders foster innovation within their teams? And we're going to talk about that. So, the framework we're going to talk about, thank you. I'm going to talk to this slide now. The framework we're going to talk about is going to cover that. So, what did illness teach me about leadership? So, illness taught me that resilience is embodied. Okay, it's not just theoretical. So, the framework I created was from becoming aware of what was happening to me in the 10 years that I was facing the disease. And when the old model of bouncing back wasn't working for me. Okay. So for me, I realized I'm not a basketball. You know, we always think that resilience is about bouncing back. It's something, so as soon as something brings us down, we got to get up, we got to put on a happy face, say all those positive affirmations and get going. And that's not resilience. That's performance. Self-awareness saved my life. I had to learn to recognize my body. And in fact, it was self-awareness that got me into hospital in the first place, because I'm not somebody who goes into hospital. I've been dealing with chronic illness for 10 years. So I was not somebody that was going to go into hospital for every single thing. But when I listened to my body, I realized that something was not right. And so I agreed to go to the hospital. And that's when we found out the news that my kidneys had failed. Compassion for me was the hardest. Like I said, a high performer, there's no room for compassion. Okay. Curiosity. Curiosity through the 10 years replaced fear for me because I was constantly finding new ways to manage my body, to understand myself, to find out when were my good moments, when were my bad moments. It helped me become more open to new ideas. So, how does resilient leaders foster innovation? So, part of the resilience framework is curiosity. And curiosity is being open to new things, knowing that this way is not the only way. That's what fosters innovation. So, being curious, open, resourceful. Okay, it meant for me, resourceful meant building new strengths, getting to know what my body could handle and not handle, and not going back to old habits. But remember, we're human. Sometimes we may slip and we go back. When I slip, I choose compassion over self criticism. Okay, why is trauma informed care important for women? Well, I think um, when it comes to women, it's important to understand exactly what they need and then to tailor what they need to them. So, trauma informed care, understanding what are the triggers that influence your current behaviors. When you understand why you are making the decisions, you get an opportunity to change the way you behave. So instead of letting your body neurologically respond to everything from a threat point of view, you are now making decisions from a conscious, compassionate point of view. So for me, trauma informed is really about that conscious, informed, and compassionate care. And I think that as women, we need more compassion. So I hope that answers your question for you, Aisha. So these two numbers should shock you, okay? The numbers, 39%, according to the Work Economic Forum of Jobs Report 2025, 39% of the workforce skills will be disrupted by 2030. And resilience and leadership skills are the fastest rise in human skills. That means that this is what the world is demanding. The second number, 43%, that is even shocking as well. From a recent report by Gartner, it shows that only 43% of employees are now willing to support change. And this came down from 74% in 2016. Now, this should worry you because if leaders continue to lead the way they are, nobody's going to follow them. And so, no change is going to happen. Cecile, can innovation thrive without resilient leadership? Why or why not? That is a very interesting question. I think maybe 10 years ago it could, but I think right now it's necessary. It's a very important part of innovation. I think that innovation is not just about changing the world, changing the way we see, um, the way we do things. Innovation is also about innovating the way we lead. It's about exploring parts of ourselves that have not been explored before. It's about putting pieces together in ways that were not seen. So, if you think about resilient leadership, and I spoke about this at another webinar where I talked about reskilling as necessary for leaders. So, what is reskilling? It's different from upskilling. Upskilling means you get new skills in your current role. You want to be better at what you are. Reskilling is actually changing what you know to do something totally different. And this in an organization to make uh, organizations resilient, they can reskill their current employees for future roles. So resilient leadership, reskilling becomes a precursor for resilient leadership because it creates a space for exploration, for being uncertain, for experimenting. And all of those things are very important in innovation. I hope that answers your question. So what does the data say? Okay. 71% of leaders report significantly higher stress since taking their role. This means that the expectations of leaders, okay, across industries is extremely high. This is not the norm. It shouldn't be. If 71% of our leaders are stressed, it means that the organization's goals and the success of its leaders is dependent on a very small percentage. Okay. 82% of employers are at risk of burnout right now. What does that mean? It means that only 18% of your workforce is able to fully function cognitively, psychologically, emotionally, and productively. 3.5 times more likely to leave. Okay. So leaders are 3.5 times more likely to leave than before. That means that we have to ensure that in order to keep the best, we have to equip them with the right skills. It's like if you're going to jump out of a plane and parachute, would you do parachuting without a parachute? But that's what it feels like for most leaders. They don't actually have the skills equipped to navigate this complexity that we're going through right now. 58% lower burnout where leaders actively support team mental well-being. So this means that the data shows that if the teams feel more supported from a mental point of view, they feel themselves they are resilient, their teams, their organization is resilient, they can prevent burnout. And why do we need to prevent burnout? We want to prevent burnout because we want everybody to function at their optimal, to bring out their best and thrive. We want people to be happy, productive. Okay, next slide. Okay, let's talk about the 5 myths that are costing leaders. Resilience means pushing through. Okay, and this is a hard myth, but something that still haunts many leaders. Resilience is not about pushing through. And every time I think about this, I'm reminded about that hospital bed. I remember I had to put out a magazine. And during that time, I could not even move my hands. I had to use a phone to keep in contact with my family to help me put everything together. I just couldn't do it on my own. And I'm somebody who doesn't ask for help. It was a very scary moment to be vulnerable and tell myself that, okay, I can't do this on my own. And now I have to ask for help. So resilience is knowing when to pause and when to restore. When I came out of hospital, I did not go straight back into work. I took time to pause, to reflect, to reframe and reposition what I really wanted to do. I was not going to go back to the old way of working. I realized I was given a second chance, and so I couldn't waste it. Myth 2, asking for help shows weakness. I thought that for a long time, but it doesn't. It shows self-awareness. The foundation of the SCR framework, the first pillar is self-awareness. The third one is that resilient leaders don't break down. Total nonsense. Of course they break down. We're human. The truth is that they break down and they rebuild with greater wisdom every time. Myth 4, it's a personality trait. Absolutely not. It's daily, learnable, practiced. Okay, it's a system you build for yourself. And it is not something that you just have or you don't have. It's something you constantly nurture. And myth 5, well-being is personal, not business. Well, totally disagree. You cannot separate your person from you when you go to work. Okay, you are a whole person. So whatever's happening in your personal life is going to affect your work. When you understand that, you can then take your well-being holistically and try to understand which parts are not working in your life. Burnout leaders are 34% less likely to outperform. Okay, so Well-being basically is a business imperative, not just a leadership imperative. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so resilient leadership is no longer an aspiration, okay? It is now a condition of future leadership. It is the new standard of excellence. It's something that every leader needs to have. It's not a nice to have. So we're moving from a style that some leaders have to a standard of excellence that is measured and set for everyone. We're no longer talking about exceptional individuals. We're talking about every leader in every organization needing this skill, needing this ability to lead. So we're no longer moving from a response to crisis. Okay, what do we do to survive this crisis in this moment? We are moving to a more proactive leadership discipline. The resilient leader doesn't wait for the storm to develop before they start training, upskilling, reskilling. They build it daily with future foresight. How do they do this? They ask their teams. They don't rely on themselves. They accept that they don't know all the answers from a point of self-awareness. They get curious about how their team sees the problem and not just them. We're moving away from the heroic leader to a more collaborative way of leadership. And resilient leadership, because it is a system, requires you to collaborate with your team. Also, it moves from a personal quality to an organizational capability. Like I said, it's not about just finding resilient people. It's about building resilient cultures in organization. Okay? Systems, structures, standards, and
Hello,
also,
Vanessa.
yes.
Yeah, we are running out of time. Can you please conclude it fast?
Okay, sure.
It's already 32 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. So let me just go to the SCCR framework. Go to the next slide. Okay, so basically the World Economic Forum has declared that resilience, flexibility, and agility is the number 2 most critical skill. Okay, move to the next slide. This is the SCCR framework that I've been talking about: self-awareness, compassion, curiosity, and resourcefulness. Okay, move to the next slide. So basically, self-awareness is knowing your triggers, lead from values, not mood, ego, or fear, understand your style and the shadow it casts. And then it starts with radical self-honesty. Next one. Compassion, we spoke a lot about this. Compassion is about seeing the human in you and in others. And it's a culture where it creates cultures where people bring real problems forward. Next slide. Curiosity, okay. This is about asking better questions, staying curious with the team. It leads to innovation because you're open to new ideas. And it was ranked top rising skill. Okay, next slide. Resourcefulness is the last pillar. Basically, it's about finding opportunities within constraints. It's about using what you have now in different ways, building adaptive strategies. It leads to creativity because you're using budgets and capacities that are not built in an optimal way. So resilient leaders create outcomes and reactive leaders wait for conditions. Next slide. I think this is the, okay. This is the framework that we basically know yourself, lead with humanity, question everything, and create with what you have. That's the underpin of the framework. And I think it's the last slide after this. So this is basically how human-centered leadership has moved from transactional to transformational, human-centered, and finally resilient. So resilient builds on all of the above, and therefore resilient leadership is beyond human-centered leadership. Next slide. Okay, so this is the business case. As you can see, 81% higher engagement, 50% less likely to quit, an increase in annual turnover, and rise in employee demand for leadership and social influence. Next slide. Okay, we've already discussed this in terms of what the new standard requires. It requires us to lead with trust, clarity, courage, honest, lean into honest dialogue, make mistakes, and it's anchored in the SCCR. Next slide. Okay. So basically, this is for the individual leader, how can you build it? You use it as a personal daily practice. As team culture, you model it openly. And as an organization, you embed the standard in how you hire, develop, evaluate, and promote. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this is, you can move on. It's something that you can think about yourself. Where in your leadership are you holding yourself to the old standard? That's something I would just say is a reflection for you. Next slide. So this is a daily practice, and you can take a screenshot of this if you like. Before your first meeting, what standard am I leading to today? Have the honest conversation. The one you've been avoiding, resilient leadership requires courage as a daily practice. And then I want you to think about this week, curiosity. Okay. When you're curious, what can happen for you? Next slide. Okay, this is the last slide. Basically, the world does not need more leaders who survive. It needs leaders who set a new standard for what leadership looks like. I hope that this discussion today has given you enough insight for you to become a more resilient leader. And thank you for your time.
Yes, Vanisha, thank you so much for your presentation today. We have got a lot of information from it, and we have more questions from the audience, Vanessa, but we will post it to your email directly so you can answer there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
And
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you so much. And please be on the backstage and join the next session, Vanessa.
Sure, I will.